So it's a welcoming the challenges, we talked about it before, welcoming the challenges of everyday life. Without that, first you wouldn't get a reflection of where you are at as far as your state of consciousness is concerned. How upset do situations, how much power do situations and other people have over you and over your state of consciousness? How often do you get upset, irritated, reactive, and so on? That's a good reflection of how present you are. Not, although that meditation is a wonderful device, a wonderful tool, but how deep you can go when you meditate is only a small part of the transformation of consciousness. You can't really tell your state of consciousness unless you go into normal life and then get reflections of yourself there. Human beings, it's not the case that humans either have an ego or are totally free of ego. The ego manifests in human beings in varying degrees. Most humans have a lot of ego that determines their thought processes and their emotions, but a little bit of awareness also in between. They may still be capable of empathy, sometimes with a limited number of people, perhaps only empathy with your family members or empathy with the people who belong to your particular group, your collective. And when you look at, you can understand the ego more deeply if you look at the extreme manifestations of ego that a certain percentage of humanity suffer from, where it's actually labeled as a mental disorder. Then you see that many mental disorders are actually just a more extreme form of what is the normal egoic state. And when you see the normal egoic state in a more extreme manifestation, then you can recognize it also when it appears as a normal state. An example of that is paranoia. Paranoia is the belief that there are people who are plotting against you, enemies who have spent most of their life following you or plotting against you. So it's a delusional system that is the result of the egoic state of fear on the one hand, because there's always fear in the background when you live through a false sense of self, and so the mind tries to explain the fear, and then it creates a story, and then you believe in the story. Secondly, another reason why the mind creates paranoia is to give itself a heightened sense of significance. I am so important, is the implication, that the CIA has 55 people whose full-time job is to try to control me. No, I'm not saying that CIA I'm not saying they don't do things, they do sometimes, as you know, but I don't think they have 55 people, or even one in my case, that try to, who knows, I may be wrong. If you work for the CIA, please raise your hand. But you can see if that is the story that your mind believes in, how important you suddenly feel. So sometimes paranoia arises because the ego's need to enhance its sense of existence, its sense of significance, its sense of importance. And if life doesn't tell you that you are important, then you have to create a story that you are important. And paranoia is one way of creating a story that gives yourself importance. There are slightly less extreme forms of that are people who believe, for example, believe they are great geniuses, but they are so superior to everything that they never even try to create or do anything, because that's beneath them. So you can have, occasionally I've met people who tell me, oh, I'm a spiritual teacher too. They tell me, oh, I see, that's great. Have you written anything? Or, no, I don't write this. The true teachings are all beyond words. I don't bother with that. Well, that's fine. They may, but that gives you a sense of you are actually superior to most people, all these insignificant people who are so, in their insignificance, they have to write books. Many stories that one creates to give oneself a sense of importance, stories that have, in the more extreme cases, little relationship with external reality. And then there is talking about Narcissus, there's another extreme form of ego that when you look at it, you can see that it has all the elements of the normal ego, but greatly emphasized, and that's called narcissistic personality disorder. And people who suffer from that are totally obsessed with themselves, with their appearance, and the way they are perceived by others. They live for that. They are totally incapable of empathy. In fact, they're hardly aware that other humans exist. They only see other humans through how they can help, how they can amplify their own ego. So what they want from other humans is attention or other forms of so-called narcissistic supply. They are always looking to enhance their self-image through being told that they are awesome, they are wonderful. They believe they know everything. The moment you question their opinion about something, they will become very angry and aggressive. You see quite a few of them on Facebook. But there's still a human being underneath that dysfunction. It's just an extreme form of ego. Nobody knows how many people suffer from narcissistic personality disorder, but the estimate is 3 to 5% of the population. Now that means 3 to 5% of the population suffer from this very extreme form of ego. And perhaps you've all met somebody who can think of somebody to, oh, I wonder if that was my dad, or that was my that was my ex-husband, my ex-wife. Hopefully not your present husband or wife. So continuous vigilance, so that you are there in the background as the awareness. When you become aware of your ego operating, it's not really ego anymore. The real ego exists in complete unconsciousness, in complete identification. When you notice something in you that's egoic, with the need to be right, the need to be superior to somebody, whatever it may be, then by noticing it, that means you are there as the observer, the awareness. So, strictly speaking, it's not even ego anymore. Once you notice your ego, what you're noticing is a deep-seated pattern in you. And it's only really ego if you're completely identified with it and there's no awareness whatsoever. This mind-made sense of self is also much more focused on the negative than the positive. To be free, you awaken to who you are beyond your history and your life situation. This is almost an analogy for the rest of your life too. If things don't get difficult, then there is no growth in consciousness. So to become aware of presence is not really it. You become aware of yourself as presence. That's a bit better. Or perhaps even better, presence or consciousness becomes aware of itself. That's kind of the closest you can get if you want to get it, as far as language is concerned. So it is important to experience, to awareness, not in relation to, let's forget for a moment our sense perceptions, because we talk about that also, how to perceive without conceptualization. Unless conceptualization is needed, then it's fine, then you bring it in, and so on. But now awareness, just awareness, which is in essence, this is the essence of meditation. The essence of meditation is not something that you do, because it's misleading to think of meditation as a doing, because any kind of doing requires time. You can't do without time. It implies that there's something, you're moving towards something. So even the underlying idea when you meditate, that you're doing meditation, can be an obstacle to true meditation. So meditation is not a doing, because meditation is a realization of being. So you have these two dimensions, the doing dimension, which is to do with the world of form, and the transcendent dimension, which is the timeless being itself, the formless, which is consciousness, if you want to give it a label. And you embody both, one could say. There's two of you almost. This is not the ultimate truth, but it's a way of putting it. There's two of you. There is the personal being, the person, the personal self, the human you, and you know that very well. The human you is not easy, doesn't have an easy life. No human has an easy life. And there may be one or two of you who were born into very privileged circumstances, and you might say, oh, that's an easy, I'd like to have a life like that, to have never need to worry about making enough money, or it's all there already provided. There's a trust fund. You're born when the baby, you're a trust fund baby, and for the rest of your life you have to worry about that. Okay, I love that. And then everything you want is immediately given to you in your childhood, and then you go on. So it seems an easy life, and this very easy life would turn out to be your greatest obstacle and create the greatest amount of suffering for you, because you will develop into very superficial, egoic creature that makes life difficult for yourself and others, and then you suffer more and more. So you can't escape it. You can't escape the challenges of life, no matter how you imagine it to be. The human is here in order to be challenged. The human is not here in order to find ultimate happiness, ultimate satisfaction or fulfillment on the level of the human. The level of the human is not designed for that. And the world doesn't know that yet, because humans are looking for solutions, the real solutions on the horizontal level of the human dimension. And it's not there. You get challenged, and whatever situation you go into, you will find the element of dukkha, the word mentioned last night, unsatisfactoriness, suffering, unhappiness, misery will creep into whatever you do somehow, sooner or later. If it hasn't crept in yet, just wait a little. And you'll find, even if you meet the most wonderful person, and then you get married or you don't or whatever, but you start living together, and sooner or later you'll discover this most wonderful person that you thought is going to make you happy also makes you unhappy, because you hadn't seen the full person yet. There was something hidden that only reveals itself when you start living together. As long as you only go to have dates, it's fine. You can gaze into each other's eyes. And it's wonderful. So you can't escape it on the human level. You get challenged, and that's fine. And you need the challenge, and you need to challenge yourself. If you want to create something, if you want to bring about some change in this world, you want to make your life, your so-called life, better, you're looking to achieve this or to learn this or to acquire this, that's part of being human. We don't deny that. And if you don't want to achieve anything, let's say you have no ambition whatsoever, you say, oh, it's all pointless, because you don't want to challenge yourself, then life will challenge you even more. If you challenging yourself would be even to engage in physical activity and jogging. You're challenging yourself, or you're lifting weights, or you're challenging the body on a physical level. The only way you can make the body stronger, the physical body, is by making, I'll put it like this, it's a strange way of putting it, but it's true. You have to make life difficult for your body, otherwise it doesn't get stronger. Well, to lift a weight is, if you ask the body, would you rather have a good just relax or lift this weight? Oh no, I just want to relax. I don't want to make my life more difficult than it needs to be, so I just, you don't get stronger without that. But when you make life difficult for the body, then more energy is demanded and more energy comes flowing in. Energy doesn't come until you demand it. There's a request or a demand for energy, because there's a gap between what you want and what, at the moment the body doesn't have enough energy, and suddenly it comes. And then you reach a point when an influx of energy starts, then it's no longer perceived that you make life difficult for your body. Once the energy starts flowing, the body enjoys this flow of energy. But before the energy starts flowing, life was difficult for the body. And so you meet the threshold of life gets difficult for the body, and then energy comes in, and then suddenly not even perceived as difficult anymore. And that you may experience that every day when you start exercising. And this is almost an analogy for the rest of your life too. If things don't get difficult, then there is no growth in consciousness. We talked about the influx of energy for the physical body, but energy can manifest in many frequencies, and ultimately it is consciousness. And so you cannot become a more conscious human being unless you experience the challenges of life. And it's good to want to create this or that, so you are choosing, to some extent, you can choose the challenges that you want to experience. Whenever you want to bring about something new in this world, it's a challenge, but you created it. You say, you want to create this, hopefully comes from a deeper level, not the ego that says, I need this, otherwise I won't be happy and fulfilled, and I won't be completely myself. I need to achieve this in order to become happy and recognized and make it. I want to make it. Weird expression. Make what? Myself. I want to make myself. If you don't challenge yourself, life will challenge you, and you will encounter challenges where you certainly didn't want that. So you can't escape. It's good to challenge yourself in a sane way, not in an insane way. And so one part of the challenges of life is the challenges that you yourself create, and that can be divided into conscious creation. You want to manifest something new, whatever it is that you want to in your career, or something you want to build up. And then there are challenges that you create unconsciously through the conditioned mind, and that's a huge amount of suffering for humans. They create their own challenges, but they perceive it as if the challenges were coming at them from the outside, not knowing that a huge amount of problems, difficulties, challenges, whatever you want to call it, are created by their unconsciousness in relation to other people, in relation to situations, the reactivity that amplifies every little problem that comes from the outside through other human beings or situations. The reactivity, the unconscious reactivity of the ego amplifies the problem and makes a drama out of relatively little. It didn't need to become a drama, but it becomes a drama through reactivity. These are challenges that humans create unconsciously for themselves, and it's a great moment of awakening when you realize that many of your difficulties, you were a significant contributing factor, let's put it like that, in the difficulties that you seem to encounter in situations and through other people and so on. And you discover your own reactivity, for example. That's a huge discovery. And then there are other types of challenges that come at you seemingly out of nowhere. It could be that an earthquake could happen here in a minute. Well, let's not manifest it. And we don't know, it comes out of nowhere. Who knows? Or aliens suddenly land. So some challenges seem to come out of nowhere, but you can't. There's so many different types of difficulties or challenges that you encounter, but you cannot escape the difficulties and the challenges. And because it's not only on the human level. Animals encounter their own challenges. Even plants and trees encounter their own challenges. Every life form encounters obstacles, opposition. Every life form experiences the fragility of life, that it's not, it's very life is fleeting and uncertain, and that is how gradually consciousness evolved, because consciousness needs to come in as a response to the challenges of life. And that is, once we realize that life is meant to be challenging or difficult, once you realize that, then you become free of the huge illusion that there's something wrong when your life becomes difficult. It's because these are all necessary. You need that. That's the good news or bad news. The world isn't here to make you happy. This is how I put it. The world is not here to make you, this is the human level of this. It's not here to make you happy. It can't do that, no matter how hard you try. It's here to make you conscious, by challenging you, by making your life difficult. And of course, as I said, that great part of it may be your own unconsciousness, but that's how if you make your own life difficult through your unconsciousness, you begin to suffer more and more and more. And you don't even, for a long time, you don't know that you're creating your own suffering. It's always like, it's them, it's there, it's there, it's there. The most unconscious people are continuously projecting all causes of their misery and unhappiness are outside. It's all outside. When you listen to a very unconscious person, you listen to the themes that run through their narrative are blaming, complaining. It's them. Him, her, them, all the situations, all the places. So here you practice being, and one of the very helpful practices here in order to avoid adding to the clutter of your mind, and in fact letting go of the clutter, is practice awareness of the simplicity of the present moment, the sense perceptions of the present moment. Acknowledge the isness of all things, give it attention, and refrain as much as possible from labeling your sense perceptions. That is not impossible. It is of course a deep-seated habit to continuously have to label your sense perception, what you're seeing. Oh, look at that, isn't that nice? Oh, this was something I saw that last year my aunt had that. Oh, I wish I had that in my book. Where can you buy that? I wonder. Oh, isn't this interesting? I wonder what that tree is called. There's nothing wrong with finding the names of trees, but don't lose yourself in that. There is another way of being in the world that is non-conceptual, that awakens the non-conceptual dimension, the non-conceptual intelligence in you. Because there is a vast intelligence waiting to be awakened, and I call it non-conceptual intelligence. It cannot be measured in IQ tests. So you might have a high IQ, doesn't mean you're closer to awakening. In fact, if you're identified with all the knowledge, then you're further away from awakening, if you're identified with it. Practicing sense perception without labeling mentally. And this is beautiful, and this is part of the beingness of the practice, being. Sense perception is visual, auditory, there are birds, visual, sky, amazing things to see, vegetation, plants, even feeling the breeze on your skin, the warm air. Sometimes the wind can get quite strong here. It's we added on first day came here. There's a trade winds that sometimes blow across the ocean that can last for hours and days, and it's a continuous, and you can feel it on your skin. It's not unpleasant, and so you can feel that. And breathe whatever scent there may be in the air, all senses, and experience that. Be there as the awareness for the sense perceptions, and that awareness is the space. So you are the space for whatever arises, but knowingly. Right now, here we can practice that. We sit here, aware of the room, the totality of it. You can look around, ceiling. There's a man sitting on the chair up here. Who is that? The body? Okay. Quite pleasant. But I'm already labeling it, but there's no need to label it. Just let it be. So in this moment, there are your sense perceptions. Mostly visual, probably, and auditory, because that's the sound of my voice. Sense perceptions. And yes, of course, you might feel the weight of your body on the chair, all that, yes. And what else is there? That which enables the sense perceptions to be. We could call that consciousness. But that is the essence of you. That is the deep I. So can you be aware of that deep I at the same time as you perceive through your senses whatever is there? So there are two dimensions here now. One dimension is the world, whatever it contains, and you take that in through sensory perception. And then you are aware of the awareness that makes sensory perception possible. You feel that you are, you can sense the I am. And here things happen. But in the depths of your being, nothing is happening. It's beyond any happening because there's no time there. There's time here everywhere. Time is the thing that enables you to do everything that you do. Time does that, and then it takes everything away. Time gives you all kinds of stuff, and it makes you grow, and they get stronger, and then it starts eroding you, and then in the end it kills you. Oh my God. Time is killing me. some people, I already realized that a long time ago, that time is killing, but the older one gets, the more you realize that time is engaged in killing you. That's scary if all that you know of yourself is the physical body and the personality. Then there's great fear, because that's all you know. You've never gone any deeper. Oh. So the timeless dimension, present moment is the portal into that dimension, transcendent dimension. Now, this is a beautiful practice, sense perceptions without, let go of labels. When they arise, just don't become too interested in the labels. They are thoughts, just let go. And then while you're here especially, the practice is to be as present moment centered as possible. Because your life, otherwise your life is usually consists of your past, the present moment, and your so-called future. Now, for most people, either future or past are almost completely occupy their attention. For younger, until you get old, it's usually future. When you reach a certain age and you realize that you don't have much future left, then you become more interested in the past and you start thinking about it. Oh, that was then there. Oh, I remember that. Yeah. But the present moment is rarely fully acknowledged. It's just a stepping stone to the next moment, which is the future. Or you actively hate it. That's not uncommon too. There are people who live in an antagonistic relationship with the present moment most of their lives. And sometimes some older people, they cantankerous old men getting, don't talk to me about that, I know it all. It's all rubbish, nonsense. So here you practice living in the two dimensions, the deep eye and the surface eye is fine, it has its place, you acknowledge it. But practice present moment living. You don't need to, the future and the past never, as obviously everybody knows that they actually don't exist as such. Welcome to our live meditation. I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil at the moment. I gave a talk here last night. It's 7 o'clock in the evening here, and the sun is going to set maybe quite soon. You may have heard the story about somebody coming to a Zen master and asking him to explain what Zen is all about, and the Zen master said, "Come and have a cup of tea." And he prepared the cup of tea and poured the hot water in the pot, and then he served tea to his guest who wanted to know about Zen, and he poured the tea into his cup, and he didn't stop pouring until the cup was overflowing, and the guest thought that the Zen master might have been absent-minded and said, "Stop, stop, the cup is overflowing, can't you see?" And the Zen master said, "Like this cup, your mind is full of ideas, viewpoints, knowledge, and all kinds of stuff. It's overflowing with stuff. How can I teach you Zen, or how can I show you Zen, unless you first empty your cup?" Now, of course, that means having an open mind, one could say. But how do you have an open mind? Your mind is already cluttered with knowledge, real knowledge, pseudo knowledge. Most knowledge is perspectives. But how can you empty your mind of all knowledge? Is that even a good thing? Well, all that's needed is in this present moment to become so aligned with this moment and accept it the way it is so deeply that the mind comes to a stop, cessation of thinking. Doesn't mean you lost your knowledge, it's still somewhere. You haven't lost your memory, and yet you have found the space that contains all that memory. You've become aware of the space, which is consciousness itself. So when you become aware of stillness, you can become aware of the space of consciousness. The space of consciousness becomes aware of itself. And that's the deeper meaning of the now. First, people think that the now is what happens in the now. But the true meaning is that the now is the space in which it happens. That's why the now itself cannot change. It's consciousness itself. And you are that. And of course, space is just a word. There isn't really a word that can adequately describe that. They're just pointers. Pointer to a city that way says that way it is not the city. Or as the Buddhists say, the pointer to the finger pointing to the moon is not the moon. We use space, which isn't something that we seem to perceive in the external world, to describe an inner, something inner. So if you were a room and somebody asked you, who are you? It's a strange analogy, I know, but so if you were this room, or that if the room had consciousness, the room would talk about itself. Who are you? Well, I'm this is the wall and the ceiling and the floor and the furniture in the room. That seems to me what the room is. It's so easy to forget what the essence of the room is, and that is the space. So we can use that analogy to point to something within you. You are also filled with furniture, the ceiling, the floor, the walls. Maybe that could be your physical body and all your mental content, would be the furniture in the room. And most people's mind is cluttered, so it's a room that's full of clutter. Some useful things and many useless things. You may also notice, if you are in that room, that side time comes when little cracks appear in the wall and the ceiling. As the room gets older, and what you're experiencing here, realizing here, is the Tao, or consciousness in its pure form. Well, I don't remember what I say it is, so let's see. Whatever you say about consciousness ultimately is not it, which is actually the first line in the Tao Te Ching, talking about the Tao. The Tao that can be spoken of is not the true Tao. This is one of the translations. That's the first line in the Tao Te Ching. So in the widest sense, Tao can be equated with consciousness. And the moment you speak about consciousness, consciousness becomes an object. But this is the reason why Lao Tse, the author of the Tao Te Ching, says, the moment you speak about it, realize that it's not it. Because the moment you speak about it, it becomes an object of thought. Whereas the essence of consciousness is that it is the eternal subject. So consciousness, you cannot understand what it is. You can only realize it as the essence of who you are. And instead of talking about it right now, I suggest that you, I, right now, see if we can realize or even just get a glimpse of what is meant by consciousness. And you might notice that the words I'm speaking are slowing down a bit. And if you're listening attentively, then your attention will be such that you tune in completely to the words which arise out of thought and make them your own. So, as I speak, these words are perceived by you and they become thoughts in your mind. And if you're very attentive, then you don't add any other thoughts. So you can actually experience this moment of me speaking in the same way in which I experience this moment. I experience this moment as thoughts that become words arising spontaneously. But I'm slowing down, which means in addition to the thoughts and words arising, there are gaps in this discourse. There are gaps between words and sentences. There's lots of gaps. And if you're attentive enough, then you will also become aware of these gaps. So you're aware of the words, which are only pointers right now. The words that I'm speaking right now are only pointers that point your attention towards the gaps where there are no words and no thoughts. So you become aware of the words, yes, which are the objects that arise in consciousness. And if you're attentive enough, you're also aware of the spaces, gaps, spaces between the words. And while you're aware of these gaps, you realize that you are not actually aware of any object. A gap or a space is not an object. It cannot be an object. When you talk about it, it becomes an object. But when you experience the gap, it is just a space. It's not an object. And so what is it that you experience? There is just a spacious presence. It has no content. And what you're experiencing here, realizing here, is the Tao, or consciousness in its pure form, its pure no form, before it becomes something, before it becomes a thought or words. So right now, you're aware of sense perceptions, because you can still see me. You're aware of the words, but more importantly, you are aware that you are aware. You know yourself as this aware presence, space. Without that space, that aware space, there would be no sense perception. It is the light of consciousness in which all the objects of consciousness are perceived. Most people are not aware of themselves as consciousness. They're only aware of the objects that arise in consciousness. And their sense of identity also, their sense of who they are, ultimately is an object that arises in their consciousness. That's me. This is my story, me and my story, my identity. I am this and that and all those things together, that's me. But they're all thought forms or emotional forms that arise in consciousness. They are an object in consciousness. And this object in consciousness, for most people, is the foundation of their sense of identity. But that, unfortunately, is an enormous limitation and ultimately a misperception of who they actually are. Most people's sense of identity, therefore, is based on a misperception, because who you truly are is not an object in consciousness. That's ephemeral. It is here for a while, then it evaporates. Who you truly are is the space of consciousness itself. And so you become aware of an underlying presence, just to use a word, a wakefulness. A certain alertness, a stillness, but not a stillness that is asleep, an alert stillness. That's the realization of consciousness, of yourself as consciousness. That frees you from this misperception that you are an object that arises in consciousness, the egoic self. That has its place, of course. You have a past. You have the conditioning. Your mind, your mental, emotional field is conditioned in certain ways, and that conditioning becomes the person or the personality. But there is a deeper dimension, a transcendent dimension to your identity. And if you realize that, that's an enormous liberation from this extremely limited and ultimately erroneous sense of self that is the person. And now the interesting thing is you can actually sense this presence that you are in the background of your life at all times. Now you may not be able to do that yet. It may become obscured many times, and then again you become identified completely with the conditioned mind, with the personality, with the person, with its reactive patterns, its conditioned likes and dislikes and opinions and so on. So, and then suddenly you know yourself as this alert stillness. So it's deeply satisfying to know that there's infinitely more to you than your personality. So you still have a personality, but it's no longer a prison. It's no longer your prison. You're no longer totally confined within it. You're aware of a transcendent dimension to who you are. And this can only be realized directly. So the answer to the question, how do you know that consciousness is what you're saying it is quite simply this: the cessation of thought and what remains is the unconditioned consciousness. That's who you are in your essence, but that's not only who you are, that is also and more fundamentally who or what the universe is in its essence. Relationships will reflect back to you your predominant state of consciousness. And that's why they are so useful. And so if you're a hermit, then it's very easy to fool yourself as to your state of consciousness. If you avoid contact with other humans because you just don't want to know anymore, it's just too unsettling, then of course, yes, you can probably be in sustained states of, if you're lucky enough, somebody brings you food, you can be in sustained states of presence and believe that you have finally arrived, but it will not yet be deeply rooted within you because it has not been tested in the fire of relationships. As a monk I knew years ago, a Buddhist monk was telling me that he was in the East somewhere, and he a Westerner, but he had become a Buddhist monk. And his teacher, the abbot of the monastery where he was, allowed him to go up a mountain and sit in a little hut for half a year. And somebody would bring him food every day, and he had nothing to do but meditate and sit. And after the first month was dreadful, unbearable, because he was sitting there with his mind torturing him on the inner and the mosquitoes torturing him on the outer level. And then gradually he was able to let go of that, and more and more presence was arising. And he then said, and then in the last month or so, presence was almost continuous, and he was convinced that he had reached the state of liberation. And then a message came from the monastery, which somebody had realized that your visa has expired. And so he had to travel to the big city and stand in line at the consulate or whatever it was. And it took hours, and then he was in the wrong line and said, I've just been standing here for 2 hours. No, this is the wrong lineup. You have to go to that one. And that was the wrong one too. And when he finally got to the official, he was hitting his table. I've been here for 5 hours. And then he suddenly became aware, and he realized all that beautiful presence was gone. That's relationships. And that was an easy relationship, just an official. relationships. Now, there are many kinds of relationships. We will talk about that. The essence of relationships, the question is always whether relationships are working harmoniously and beautifully, or whether they are conflict-ridden, is determined by whether there is space in your relationship. That applies to any relationship. The question is there space in this? What does space mean? I don't mean space in the sense of distance between people. That's another aspect. I mean inner space. There is a line in Khalil Gibran's Prophet which talks about space, but this is not what I mean. This is also true, by the way. He says, let there be spaces in your relationship, which means don't cling to each other all the time. Occasionally go your own way and then come back together. That's also true. But what I'm talking about here is inner space in the relationship. And what that is, you probably know already, and we'll come to that now as we address the different kinds of relationships that you encounter in life and see how the arising new consciousness can be sustained in those challenging situations, because there is no doubt that human beings are very challenging. The other human beings. So you have, well, of course, the first thing that comes to mind when you talk about relationships is the intimate relationships, which usually start off as romantic and then become something else. This is what all usually comes to mind, what many films are still about, movies that you see, a large part are still about that. And it is what many people's lives are preoccupied with, what people look to for their sense of fulfillment and happiness. And at the same time, those intimate relationships are one of the greatest sources of unhappiness. So a little contradiction here, of course. People look to it for their fulfillment and happiness, and in many, many cases, the opposite happens. And in many, many cases, people experience the shift from the very person that was supposed to make me happy, now makes me unhappy. That's the normal course of relationships. I read the other day, I don't know who said it, and he said there is no marriage in which a week after the wedding, there's no marriage in which 1 week after the wedding you cannot find grounds for divorce. And the secret is in continuing to find grounds for marriage, he said. Let's put this aside, because that is the most problematic. But you are engaged, we will come to that, of course, but you are engaged throughout the day and throughout your life in many kinds of relationship, different types of relationship. You have relationships with your children, if you have children. You have relationships with your grown-up children. You have relationships with your parents, relationships with siblings, family members, relatives. You have relationships with friends. You have relationships, casual, brief relationships when you interact with people to do this or that, to buy something, to ask for information on the telephone. These are all relationships, and they're all part of, if there is dysfunction in you, egoic dysfunction that will manifest in all relationships. You can move and be at rest at the same time. You can rest in the stillness within and move externally. And that's another way of looking at connectedness with being while you do. That's the art of living. So one way of practicing it is when you're actually physically moving from A to B, still have that connectedness with being and have that still place. So it feels almost as if the world is moving around you, the scenery is moving, and you are never moving inside. It's a bit like if you were watching maybe at some point, as a movie technology develops, we'll have movies where you can experience being totally immersed in the action. So you're sitting in, this is a science fiction idea, you're sitting in the movie theater and then everything, it looks totally real and you might even interact with the characters. And so when you rest within, it's a little bit like that how the world, what it does to me, feels that you are actually never going anywhere. You remain continuously in the one low place. But the world continuously shifts around you as you move. And so you're resting in the stillness. And then, of course, there's noise around you and all kinds of things. The scenery changes. Right now, it's this room. Maybe in a couple of hours, it'll be the windscreen of the car. And you're resting in the same place still. And then it might be an airport, people running around. And you yourself may be running around. Perhaps you have to run to the gate. And you can still feel resting. There's still that place that's unmoved, the stillness, the timeless you, the spaciousness. And this is where as I mentioned before, the Zen saying, hurry slowly comes from. What that means is, the slowly means this really, that's the unmoved, the unmovable within. And basically also means you're always at home, no matter where you are. You have that feeling of being at home in yourself. And that is also fundamentally different from the normal state of consciousness, where most people carry around or are burdened with a continuous sense of unease. And there's always the sense they've never really arrived. They're always trying to arrive somewhere. One could almost say, metaphorically speaking, they are trying to get home. But even when they are actually at home where they live, they're not at ease. There's always something lacking. I'm not fully myself, or whatever it is, however the mind might interpret it. You don't feel at home. Home, by the way, is a lovely word in the English language. I believe it has a Germanic origin, but all these languages, of course, are Indo-European. They go back. Many of them have certain roots in Sanskrit even. So home, what does that sound like? Home. Home. E.
So and then the world is not experienced as stressful anymore, even when it moves fast, or might even require you to move fast sometimes. But this is always another way of putting it is the center of the wheel, the absolute center. The wheel is spinning, but your conscious, the focus partly of your consciousness, conscious attention, is in the center of the wheel. That's the space within, the stillness, and then there's the wheel, and that's the movie show of your life that spins, sometimes slow, sometimes fast. And then it slows down again, but it's always doing something. So, and this may also help you because a few of you or many might feel a little bit sorry that the retreat is coming to an end. Whenever something ends, it's a little death. Even saying, I mentioned it somewhere in a book too, even saying goodbye to someone is a little death, a temporary, because one situation comes to an end. And this, as I mentioned, I believe in the New Earth or Power of Now. Most languages to say goodbye, it's a word, the expression they use is see you again. Or wow, auf Wiedersehen, arrivederci, see you again. Later, alligator. And that, but making sure this is so just as an affirmation that okay, this is not the last time, because to cover up this feeling of sudden emptiness. Now, if you realize that this place within is what this entire retreat is about, being rooted in that, the center of the wheel, or the unmoved, timeless, unconditioned stillness, consciousness, whatever pointer works best for you. And then you realize you don't actually, that's the real retreat. The real retreat is that place within. Everything else about the retreat is the externals, and that's fine. So the retreat actually never goes away, because the retreat is the retreat, being home within yourself in that place. Then you are on permanent retreat. Permanent retreat from the world, and yet able to interact with the world. And interact consciously, no longer in the dysfunctional way. And if your interactions are not perfect, that's fine. You also become comfortable with the imperfections of this world, the so-called imperfections, including the imperfections of your particular form identity, which may make mistakes, sometimes do something unconscious. It's not impossible. And you become okay with that also. For that in that place is okay with what is. So the retreat is always with you. So, but you can interact. And what I just explained is the actual meaning of the expression. It goes back to who first used that expression, I don't know. Being in the world but not of it. It's an expression used in Christian terminology teachings, being the possibility of living in such a way that you are in the world but not of it. It's a Christian expression term, but it could be anything. It could be Buddhist, it could be anything. Being in the world but not of it is exactly This is the meaning of what I just described and what you can verify in yourself. When you rest in that inner stillness, you are obviously in the world. That's the movie show around you that changes all the time. But not of it means your sense of self is not entangled in all these things that continuously arise and pass away, as the Buddha would have said. All phenomena continuously arise and pass away all the time. And so you don't get entangled. Entangled means having your sense of self entangled in all the things that continuously arise and pass away.
How is it possible to remain present if you are fighting a serious illness where the outcome is not sure? Greetings from the UK. So somebody in England, perhaps it is I assume it is the person who is asking the question. How is it possible to remain present if you're fighting a serious illness where the outcome is not sure? Well, not only is it possible to be present in such a situation, it really is the only answer you have to that situation, is to allow it to force you into presence, where there's no past, no future, don't go there. You just stay with this moment, and you can become acutely present. You may not have much future anymore, so you can't go there. Most humans still have the illusion that there's a lot of future. It's not really much anyway, but at least they still have the illusion, and that there's some kind of fulfillment still coming in the next moment. It's not going to come if it's not here now. Presence. Especially a life-threatening illness. I have seen quite a few cases of people who awakened through contracting a life-threatening illness. In some cases they died soon after, in some cases healing happened. It no longer matters really that much, because the purpose of human life has already been fulfilled when the flowering of consciousness happens in you. And so those people who became fatally ill in the last weeks or months of their lives, they flowered. The light was shining through them. They became like that. Thought subsided, presence arose, the personality got burned out of them and was replaced by just conscious presence. The personality in such a dreadful situation either has to suffer tremendously, it can't survive in that situation. Oh, what's going to happen to me? But if you surrender, it gets burnt up in presence, and all that remains of you, you die already, in other words. You die. Before you die, the personality dies, and all that remains is this absolute field of presence. And you might not be able to explain very much, but you're just there. It would never have happened without the illness. This can also happen as people get very old and approach death through old age. I have also seen that happen,
you reach the age of 95, whatever, death comes, and the personality subsides, and all that remains is the flowering of consciousness. You die before you die. That's an expression sometimes used, I don't remember where it comes from, maybe Sufism. You dying before you die so it can happen through serious illness, it can happen through the approaching death through old age. It can dying before you die can also happen when you lose everything, through some disaster. Family members are lost, people around you, or you lose all possessions and all status, everything. And again, the personality that lived through identification with all these external things that have been taken away is in such dreadful agony that the only way out is surrender, and then the entire structure of the mind-made self collapses. Those are extreme cases. So when such disaster happens, there's always that possibility there of grace suddenly appearing. So as I often say, grace is hiding behind every disaster. But for it to show its face fully, surrender is necessary. Surrender eliminates the ego, and when the ego is gone, grace appears.
Somebody sent me a sticker to put on the car. I haven't put it on my car yet. A very wise sticker, I don't know where it originated. It says, you don't need to believe every thought you think. Now, Stephen Mitchell, fortunately, does not exclusively use the masculine pronoun as it's done in most other translations. He, the master, he varies between she and he. So sometimes the master is seen as feminine, and sometimes the master is seen as masculine, which is a wonderful thing, since the Tao has many qualities that are closely related to the feminine, the openness, and so on. There are many images in the Tao Te Ching that are feminine images to point to the essential nature of the Tao. Not that the Tao itself is feminine, but to get a feeling for what Tao is, the Tao Te Ching uses feminine imagery. So here we have a few lines about the master. The master keeps her mind always at one with the Tao. That is what gives her her radiance. The Tao is ungraspable. How can her mind be at one with it? Because she doesn't cling to ideas. The Tao is dark and unfathomable. How can it make her radiant? Because she lets it. Since before time and space were, the Tao is. It is beyond is and is not. How do I know this is true? I look inside myself and see. Let's look at it again and see. The master keeps her mind always at one with the Tao. That is what gives her her radiance. Keeps her mind at one with the Tao. In the next line it says, if it's ungraspable, how can her mind be at one with it? And it says, because she doesn't cling to ideas. Interesting. She doesn't cling to ideas. That reminds me of a famous Zen saying. I don't remember who said it, but a Zen master said it. Don't seek for the truth, just cease or stop cherishing opinions. That is, I believe, points to the same inner state of disidentification from thinking. She doesn't cling to ideas. Cling to. It doesn't mean she doesn't have ideas, the master. But the master does not cling to ideas. And the Zen master, when he said, don't look for the truth, just stop cherishing opinions. He didn't say, stop having opinions, just as Lao Tse does not say, don't have ideas. It says, don't cling to ideas, and the other master says, stop cherishing opinions. So this clinging, which is the same as cherishing, is self-identification with thoughts that arise. In other words, you then believe completely in every thought that comes into your head. Amazing. You believe in it, that means you are it. That is self-identification with thinking. So, how then to be at one, always at one with the Tao? So simple. On the one hand, you could call it stop cherishing opinions. Now, any thought that arises ultimately is an opinion, you could say. Stop cherishing, stop your self-identification with that. Or don't cling to ideas, in the words of Lao Tse, or this present translation here. So that there's always a space between you and your thoughts, that you are, or rather, you are not the thought, you are the space for the thought. This is how I put it sometimes. You're familiar with that, and perhaps you, in yourself, you know it. You don't have to be in your thoughts, but you can be the space for your thoughts. Then no matter how weird your thoughts are, it doesn't matter that much. You don't say, oh my God, I shouldn't be having these weird thoughts. No, because that's another thought. I'm supposed to be spiritually advanced, and why am I still having these thoughts? There must be something wrong with me. Does that sound familiar? That's also thoughts. That's more thoughts that say, I shouldn't be having these thoughts, there's something wrong with me. And then you believe in those thoughts. Thoughts that judge other thoughts. That may sound familiar to some of you. And there's nothing personal in it, it's the human mind. So you don't need to eliminate thoughts or to say, I should only have pure thoughts because I'm a spiritual person. Because by now I should have transcended all impure thoughts. Well, then you're in a dilemma, because in this world of polarities, if you only want to have pure thoughts, you're creating the other polarity in the unseen. And sooner or later, the other polarity will come up from behind, creep up. And this has been done sometimes by Christians who try to practice the teachings of Christ without entering the state of consciousness out of which that comes. So they try to be pure and spiritual and good Christians and denied the other polarity, repressed it, and then suddenly they get overpowered by something deeply destructive and negative. So you have these occasions, you have a nice, wonderful person who always talks in spiritual, just so and spiritual. And before you know it, he's screaming at his wife or even hitting his wife. Where did that come from? And he can't even admit to himself that this is what's happening. And so if you push away certain thoughts because they do not fit into the mental image of who you are as this or that, then they get to assume a life of their own. And before you know it, they invade your mind again, if only in your dreams, and suddenly you have dreadful nightmares. But during the day, you're such a spiritual person, and at night you suddenly have dreadful nightmares. Monsters come, or you become a monster. Oh my God, this shouldn't be happening. And that's because you're pushing something away. The true spiritual does not lie in one thought or another thought. It lies in being there as the space for your thoughts. Then it doesn't matter anymore, really. Whatever thought arises is no more than that. It's a form that arises at this moment. You don't resist it. You don't need to resist it. But you are the space for it. You don't become it. Somebody sent me a sticker to put on the car. I haven't put it on my car yet. A very wise sticker. I don't know where it originated. It says, you don't need to believe every thought you think. So this is the practice then of being the space or the witness for your thoughts rather than being the thought. And you can practice with your opinions. Many thoughts are all thoughts could be called opinions, but there are certain things that are definitely, clearly recognizable as opinions when you are talking to people every day, when you're having a discussion or talk with friends or colleagues or neighbors. So they will express their opinion, whatever it may be about, and you may express your opinion. And you can then observe whether or not there is self-identification with your opinion. And your opinion, of course, is a mental position, the position of the mind. Are you identified with a mental position? If you are, then you are cherishing opinions, in the words of the Zen master, or you are clinging to ideas, in the words of Lao Tse. And how do you know that? You know that when, as you discuss things, you become either defensive or aggressive in the expression of your opinion. Emotion flows into, and you get worked up in, why is that happening? Why are you becoming defensive or aggressive? And of course you have to look inside yourself to see whether this is the case or not. Are you becoming defensive or aggressive? You feel the influx of emotion. And why is this happening? Because unconsciously you feel threatened by somebody who attacks or questions or contradicts your mental position. Why do you feel threatened by somebody who questions your mental position? That is a sign that you had identified with the mental position. And identified means your sense of self was in it. So the person is not attacking your opinion in your unconscious viewpoint. The person, you're being attacked in your very life is under attack because you identified this. This is not true, but this is how it is perceived, as if they were attacking your very existence, because you identified with the mental position. There was a self in it. So anybody who questions it questions your very existence. It's an unconscious process. So that's an amazing thing to realize in yourself, and it's a deep-seated unconscious pattern in most human beings. And of course, as you become conscious of that, you can usually see it much more clearly in others, more easily, in your friend or whoever you're having, than in yourself. Usually says, oh, yes, that's what he always does. Of course, now I understand what my husband or my wife does. I understand completely. That's step one.